In this problem, you're asked to verify that cotangent squared theta times the quantity tangent squared theta plus 1 is equal to cosecant squared theta. Now, again, the overall idea here is to choose one side or the other to start with, and you always start with the more complicated side, and then step by step transform that side into the other side of the equation. So starting with the first thing I said, choose the more complicated side of the equation. So I would say there's a lot more going on with the left-hand side of this equation than the right-hand side. So start by writing just the left-hand side of the equation on its own. So cotangent squared theta times the quantity tangent squared theta plus 1. And the idea is to go step by step using just one fundamental identity at a time to transform this side into the right-hand side, which is that cosecant squared. So once we get an equals cosecant squared theta, then we're done with this problem. Now, there's a lot of times, there's more than one way to attack these equations. And so it is nice, I mean, you might want to use the pause button, and every time we write out one expression, pause it and think about what you would write next. And if you solve this problem in a way that's different than what I show you in just a second, that's fine, as long as you double check that each step is equal to the step before it, and you haven't started by assuming that both sides are equal to each other or anything like that. Now, it's going to benefit you in calculus if you are well aware of this trig identity, that 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta. And I know that's one that you've just learned about in the last couple of weeks, so it might not be right at the front of your memory right now, but I'm telling you that it'll pay off to remember that identity. And you will use it throughout Calculus 1 and Calculus 2. It's going to be an even bigger deal. Okay, so I mentioned that so that you notice that, okay, well, I have tangent squared theta plus 1. That's the same as 1 plus tangent squared theta. So this right here is equal to secant squared theta. And so the left-hand side there is equal to, I'm going to leave that cotangent alone, cotangent squared theta times secant squared theta. And now that's not anything that maybe pops into my mind. So, and I want to turn it into cosecant squared. There's nothing obvious to me that's going to turn that into cosecant squared. So just if there aren't any obvious steps and you're dealing with things like cotangent and secant, a good strategy is to rewrite them in terms of sine and cosine. And so cotangent, remember that's the reciprocal of tangent. So if tangent is sine over cosine, cotangent is cosine over sine. Okay, and we have it squared, so this whole thing is squared. That's cotangent squared times secant is 1 over cosine. And that's secant squared, so we have this whole thing squared. Well, when you square a fraction, all you do is square the top and square the bottom. So that first part is equal to cosine squared over sine squared. Just square the top, square the bottom. And same thing in that second fraction. So 1 squared, that's just 1 over cosine squared. And then notice now that the cosine squareds will cancel. And so this is equal to 1 over sine squared, which we could write as 1 over sine quantity squared, which is 1 over sine is equal to, oops, secant. I meant to say secant there. Yeah, good enough there. Cosecant. Blast. Okay, let's see if we finally have this straight. 1 over sine theta quantity squared. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant. Sorry about that, guys. I'm a little bit overly tired here. All right, and so we've led ourselves to the right-hand side, and so we've verified the identity.